we can't stop multiple sclerosis from developing yet, but we can slow it down or halting the progress. And therefore, we may be able to change the course of the disease dramatically and help to improve the patient's day-to-day quality of life.
Hello, you're watching Proactive. World Brain Day, celebrated annually on July the 22nd, puts a spotlight on brain health across all ages. For more, I'm joined by Immunic's Dr. Hella Kohlhof. Hella, very good to speak with you. You're the Chief Scientific Officer of a company working on a new treatment option for multiple sclerosis, a chronic inflammatory disease of the central nervous system, and that also includes the brain. Can you tell us a bit more about MS, how the disease manifests, and why early recognition and treatment is important for long-term brain health?
So yes, absolutely fine. And it's so important to talk about brain health and multiple sclerosis. So multiple sclerosis is an autoimmune disease that affects the brain, but also the spinal cord and the optic nerve. So it's our own immune system that attacks the myelin. So that is the coating that protects the nerves, and what is super important for the function of the nerves as well. And multiple sclerosis is considered to be an immune-mediated demyelinating disease of the central nervous system. So it's not only a walking disorder, what is sometimes thought. So it is a progressive disease, without effective treatment, that really leads to severe disability. And unfortunately, MS often affects young adults. So MS begins in the early ages of the 20s to the 40s, and right at the time when these young adults start their careers, their families, and the planning of their lives. So brain health at this stage has a long-lasting impact. And early disease, unfortunately, or early disease activity, unfortunately, can be silent. So usually patients are only diagnosed when they had the first relapse or even the second relapse, so quite late in principle, because once the neurons are lost, they can't be replaced. And early diagnosis enables early treatment. So the sooner we identify the disease, the sooner we can start the treatment, and slowing down disease activity, reducing the inflammation, and potentially delaying disability. That's important. And fortunately, the diagnostic tools are improving rapidly, so we have more sensitive imaging methods and blood biomarkers like NFL or GFAP. And the access so far is unequal, unfortunately, but we think that with raising awareness, this really can help to close the gap, because greater public and medical awareness of early symptoms can encourage faster referrals to specialists and reduce the delays, which is essential for better long-term outcome.
Hella, education is one of the core pillars of this year's World Brain Day campaign. How do you see the role of scientific research in empowering patients and their families, but also physicians, caregivers, and others affected to better understand and manage chronic neurological conditions like MS?
Yeah, I think that basic research and translational research is super important, because you really need to understand what's ongoing there. And when I was a young student sitting in a microbiology lecture, it was that the professor depicted the genome of a bacteria, and I thought, what the hell shall I use this for? Why do I need to learn it? And he really said, you know what? Only if you know the enemy, you can really fight against this. And therefore, I think that every new scientific insight on the mechanism helps us to understand the biology of multiple sclerosis, and how it starts and how it progresses and where we find new targets. And therefore, for the translational science, we really need to translate the science into practical knowledge. And the better we understand the mechanism behind multiple sclerosis and how immune cells attack the central nervous system, and then we can turn the knowledge into more targeted therapies and clearer guidance for the patients and doctors. And for the patients, it is as well super important, because knowledge can reduce the fear and stigma of multiple sclerosis. So when we share the research findings in an understandable way, that's important. We help to reduce the fear and the uncertainty and the stigma around multiple sclerosis.
Can you tell us more about Immunic's work in this area and where your MS development program stands?
Yeah, happy to do so. So, Immunic's role is in uncovering the disease drivers. So at Immunic, we are working to identify the processes and the signaling pathways that drive the inflammation and the progression in multiple sclerosis. And it's important to know that neuroprotection is, to my mind, key to reduce disease progression in multiple sclerosis, because 50% of the disability worsening, even in the relapsing forms of multiple sclerosis, is driven by processes which are independent of relapses. And with Vidofludimus calcium, we are currently running, or it is in development of several multiple sclerosis clinical trials, so in relapsing multiple sclerosis and in progressive multiple sclerosis. So for RMS, we have enrolled already more than 2,200 patients in phase 3 clinical trials, so in the ENSURE trials, and we expect to have top-line data end of 2026. And for progressive MS, we just released in April positive data from the phase 2 CALLIPER trial, and this showed positive effects in delaying time to 24-week confirmed disability worsening. And this really supports Vidofludimus' ability to slow disease progression in multiple sclerosis patients. And CDW, so confirmed disability worsening, is the accepted regulatory endpoint for pivotal trials, and we are a bit proud and very positive that we have seen these signals in the phase 2 clinical study.
The Global World Brain Day initiative highlights prevention and lifestyle as key tools in brain health. While MS isn't considered preventable in the classic sense, what role could early intervention and novel treatments like those you're developing play in preserving brain function and quality of life?
So to date, multiple sclerosis unfortunately can't be prevented. There's no vaccine, no lifestyle measure or so. But once it's diagnosed, we can act. So we can prevent further damage to the brain and the spinal cord when we have early treatment and early diagnosis. So our research aims to prevent or slow down disease progression. And at Immunic, we think that we can do both. So stopping the immune-driven attack and supporting neurons to be more resistant towards the attacks by strengthening the neuronal survival and reducing the neurotoxic environment in the brain via a neuroprotective factor, and it's called Nor1 activation. So the goal is to preserve what's still healthy in the brain and in the nerves. So we want to protect the brain functions and help people to stay active, independent, and engaged in their lives for as long as possible. Because loss of independence is a major fear for multiple sclerosis patients. So for people living with multiple sclerosis or other brain diseases, the prospect of losing mobility or mental clarity is often most frightening aspect of the illness. So we can't stop multiple sclerosis from developing yet, but we can slow it down or halting the progress. And therefore, we may be able to change the course of the disease dramatically and help to improve the patient's day-to-day quality of life. And what drives us at Immunic is in relapsing MS and PMS, progressive MS, in the clinical phase 2 studies, we have seen early signs that our approach might make a real difference in the near future. And we think that really the combination of anti-inflammatory effects and neuroprotective function is most promising.
Hella, I hope you'll keep us updated on progress with your programs. Thank you very much for your insights today.
Thank you.
Dr. Hella Kohlhof, Chief Scientific Officer at Immunic.